All right, we have about, participants are coming in, folks. We'll get started in just about 1 minute. All right, good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ryan Burrows, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Kratom Association. To start, Mac has asked me to speak a little bit on the American Kratom Protectors program. The American Kratom Association is first and foremost a grassroots advocacy organization. We work to protect the rights of Americans to choose to consume safe kratom. So to be effective in our activities, we rely on the involvement of thousands of American kratom consumers, and particularly those who do so much as part of our American Kratom Protectors program. This program is a way for us to organize and mobilize kratom advocates to stop bans and help pass kratom consumer protection legislation. Each state has one or more chairpersons who help organize and lead state efforts, and each congressional district has a district captain to assist the state chairpersons and be a resource if issues arise. As you can imagine, filling and maintaining over 500 positions is a challenge. So this summer, we're reaching to everyone to see who is able to commit to being a state chair, district captain, and an active member of their state kratom protection program. If you're interested in getting more involved or have been involved in the past, please contact us at kp@americankratom.org, which I will also put in our chat. We have a new advocacy outreach coordinator, Jules O'Brien, who will be contacting many of you, and we're excited to have her, and we know we'll benefit from her efforts. Also, we have asked one of our most passionate, effective, and powerful kratom protectors, Dion from California, to be on tonight's webinar. And I'd like to ask her to share a little bit on what it means to her to be a state chair and a kratom protector. Dion, if you're available.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Dion. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. It took me a while. It wasn't allowing me to join in, so I didn't hear the beginning as to what you wanted me to say. Sorry about that.
Just, if you don't mind, just telling your story, and you're such an impactful contributor to our association, and as a kratom protector, any stories that you have with that as well.
Okay. My name is Dion Evans, and when I was 16, I had a cast put on my leg, a short leg cast put on too tight, and it killed the nerves and circulation. Fast forward to 2016, when the CDC came out with their new guidelines, my pain medicine clinic dropped all of their patients. And it didn't matter if you were not terminal cancer, you were dropped. There was no taper, there was no warning, there was no discussion. I'm a terminal patient, I did not have terminal cancer. So after about 9 months of trying to do it on my own, I have been taught self-hypnosis, biofeedback, I do meditation. I was trying everything and anything and was about ready. In fact, I was less than a half an hour away from taking my own life, when fortunately I had been told about kratom, and I started doing research on it during that time. When I ordered, my delivery was late. So I figured it wasn't going to show up, and I just couldn't do it anymore. My daughter had enough. She couldn't deal with all of the "you better come say your goodbye" phone calls anymore. She sent me an email saying that her and my grandkids would be better off assuming or acting as if I was already dead. And they couldn't take it anymore. So between that pain and the pain that I deal with on a day-to-day basis and all of it just got to be too much. And when I thought my order wasn't going to arrive, that was the last straw for me. As I was going outside, the mailman showed up and he had my first delivery of Kratom. I was the biggest doubter there could ever be that it would ever work, let alone changing my life as much as it has. I came from a medical school background, all science. I had no faith in dietary substances at all. And I I never thought it was going to work, but it did. And I didn't realize that I had lost all hope. Along with all the pain and dealing with everything that I've had to deal with, I lost hope, and that's where it gets dangerous. We have so many people who just have no hope, and Kratom can offer that to them. It can help so many. If we lose Kratom, it's going to be devastating to the millions of people that are already taking it, but to people who can benefit from it in their future. I was at a point to where I couldn't do anything for myself. I was completely bedridden. James had to do everything for me. As embarrassing as it is, he was changing my diaper, he was feeding me. He'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and I'd be completely unresponsive. And away we'd go again, to the ER. It's not just how it's affected my life, but it's how it's affected my family's life as well. I have my daughter and my grandkids back. We never thought that I'd be able to attend any high school graduations of my grandchildren, but I've been able to not only be alive for 2 of the 3, I've attended their graduations. It has helped me in more ways than I could ever imagine, let alone I thought possible. When it comes to fighting in California, we have a huge state. We have a difficult state. I've got a lot of super advocates who are just really on the ball and very, very good at what we do, but it's still a difficult state. And every time we have what looks to be a positive, as far as a senator helping us or a representative helping us, it never pans out. But still trying to keep people active and keep people hopeful, all we can do is tell our stories and keep watch. It's really important that we watch Legiscan and that we watch our communities, that we watch any kind of news, that we put up alerts on our phones so that anytime Kratom is dinged in any kind of media, it comes up for us, and that we let each other know, keeping open communication between all of us is really important.
That's,
I
that's
don't know
so
what
true.
I can say. Yeah.
Well, Dion, you've said a lot. You are truly an inspiration, and I honestly you were very important along with other protectors in our efforts in Nevada, and was hopeful to meet you in person, and I know I will soon someday. But
I hope so
it
too.
it's an amazing story, and so good to see you tonight. And thank you for being on our panel.
Thank you for having me.
No, please, and if you have any other comments that you may think of during the evening, please chime in, and
Okay.
I will turn it over to Mac to give us some updates as well
Okay.
on our Kratom consumer.
All right. Thank you.
Ryan, thank you. And Dion, thank you very much. Obviously, this is a very important thing for us to be engaged in as protectors of the Kratom community. Our issue tonight is to take what Dion told us and then convert it into actionable kinds of activities that will make a difference in the fight that we're in to make sure that we preserve the right of consumers to have access to safe Kratom products. And I think that as powerful as you heard Dion's story, there are others who have similar kinds of stories. I've heard from literally thousands of Kratom consumers in various legislative hearings around the country. And I can tell you that it moves the needle for legislators who hear those comments, who hear those personal stories. It's one thing for us to be able to describe from a public policy standpoint why Kratom should be a part of the toolbox for people that are trying to manage their health and well-being. And we can describe how important that is to legislators. And on a policy level, it's understandable, but it becomes one of many things, if not hundreds, of proposals that they're trying to juggle and assess priorities to. And the human factor, being able to hear these personal stories about how people have had their lives saved by Kratom, how their quality of life has improved, how their families' lives have improved because of access to safely formulated Kratom products is invaluable to our fight. And what Dion also talked about in terms of the engagement of a United Kratom Protectors organization is what we're trying to build and actually reconfigure now. We've tried to assemble this army of Kratom warriors, and our question is that we always have to assess is how do we do this most effectively? And the truth is that in an organizational structure, being able to have people on the ground at both the state level and then in the congressional district level overlays also onto the state legislatures because it gives us a group of people who can become advocates and who are very vocal and are personal constituents of these congressional members or state legislators. And that makes a huge difference in terms of the approach that we make to them. We've decided at the AKA to do a couple of important things that we think are going to strengthen our ability turning into the new year with new legislative sessions and with an important focus on the federal government with the Federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act. We're reorganizing at each level as best we can, identifying where we have people that are able to commit the time and effort. And we want to make it as efficient and easy as possible, by the way. Some have more time than others, but your stories are important. And we want to give you the tools that will help you to be efficient in exercising or disseminating rather this information and in keeping everyone informed. So we're working on doing that. The hiring of Jules O'Brien in order to help to actually coordinate this activity is our commitment, evidence of our commitment to make sure that we have a better organizational structure and a better communication structure for all of you as we start to fight these battles and to keep you as updated as we can on some of these things. One of the things that we struggle with is within the Kratom community are distractions. And those distractions can come in the form, for example, of our critics who like to get on social media and take shots. And they say what they claim, and it's their personal point of view, are the hazards of taking kratom and the threat that it poses to people that are consumers of kratom. Ultimately, in some cases with claims, or people are saying that family members have died from using kratom. Now, our approach to this is fairly basic. One is we respect that anyone who has had an experience of losing a family member is obviously, and if they believe that kratom was the sole cause of it, there's only two things that are important about that. One is to respect the fact that grieving parents or family members are not going to be persuaded by any kind of argument that's made on our side of the ledger. They're not even going to be persuaded in many cases with the evidence that's available from a scientific standpoint. That's a journey that they're going to have to go through personally. And as I've advised in the past, and I reemphasize here tonight, I don't think it profits us to engage with these people, however vitriolic they are, however nasty they are. These are people that simply are committed to their point of view, and they are small in numbers. For this reason, the evidence that would point to kratom being the cause of death of anyone is simply not available to us right now. No one can say that it is impossible to overdose on kratom, but we haven't seen the evidence. In fact, all of the data that has been submitted by the Food and Drug Administration, which alleged that there were deaths that were attributable to kratom, and the evaluation was done by the Centers for Disease Control of the reports from medical examiners and from coroners, indicated that there were deaths where kratom was detected in the toxicology screens and the blood samples of decedents. That's all it showed. There is no level of kratom intoxication or levels in the bloodstream which would indicate that kratom is in fact toxic or deadly. Now, we know that based on the most recent data points and affirmed by the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Secretary Becerra, in a letter to Congressman Mark Pocan and Senator Mike Lee, he affirmed that of the safety data that has been accumulated and assembled by the Food and Drug Administration, they know that most of those deaths are in fact the result of adulterated kratom products or from poly drug use, which would not be surprising in some cases, given that kratom can and is effectively used by some people to wean off of opioids or other deadly substances that they would overdose on, absent being able to get off of that addiction. And those are the facts that we have in front of us. And we are supporting at the American Kratom Association as much science as we can. We're seeing great positive results. The US government is funding more than $30 million in science on kratom today, looking for the answers about not only the toxic levels of kratom and whether it is the cause of deaths, whether it's dangerously addictive, and whether it has the potential to be the beneficial therapy that it potentially is available for us to do. And yet, through all of that, all of the positive scientific results since 2018, when Dr. Brett Giroir, the Assistant Secretary for Health then of the Department of Health and Human Services, when he withdrew the FDA scheduling recommendation, he did so with the acknowledgement that the emerging science has demonstrated that the FDA's position was outdated and wrong. And now we know today, with all of the new science that's available, and you can look to the recent evaluation of every peer-reviewed published article that's available in the universe that was done by the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence at the United Nations and the World Health Organization, documented that there was insufficient evidence to recommend even a critical review, much less a scheduling, under an international standard that is much lower than we have in the United States under the Controlled Substances Act. So the bottom line on this is very simple. We have a challenge to focus our energy and our efforts on telling our story. And we want to empower you as the Kratom Protectors with all of the information that can be conveyed and to give you the logistical tools in order to effectively do that. We're going to get better at what we're doing because we need to be effective against this onslaught of attacks that are coming. In Wisconsin, one of the areas where we were making progress in a banned state, we had law enforcement officials inaccurately make statements to members of the Wisconsin legislature about the potential threat that kratom poses in their community without a shred of evidence to document it. And we know that our counter argument is always most effectively delivered by focusing on the data and the science combined with the personal stories, not attacking others, but the personal stories of kratom consumers that where kratom has really impacted them. And I sat in the Wisconsin hearing and I heard people that from Wisconsin residents in a state where it's banned talk about how kratom had saved their lives, had made them employable, had kept them as productive members of society. So that's what we're doing here in terms of this Kratom Protectors program and what we want to accomplish along the way. Our enemies are out there with the FDA. They are influencing the medical laboratories that are involved in the reviewing toxicology screens. They are influencing medical examiners. And what we want to do is not influence, but rather deliver to all of those detractors the evidence. Then the evidence suggests and proves that kratom in its natural form is safely ingested by individuals when responsibly used. And that's what we advocate for as well, is responsible use of kratom. There's nothing that can probably affirm what I've told you better than to hear from a former legislator who's been on both sides of the aisle here, having heard it, having seen what is most effective. And so I'm going to turn it over to David Carlucci, former state senator from New York, and a great advocate for the kratom community, to kind of describe to you how important this is for us to be focused on the message that we're delivering to these state legislators. So David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mac. And thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Dion, and everyone on the call tonight. Your input and your involvement in this is just so crucial. So I want to thank you for being on at this late hour. Your message is key. Like Mac talked about, I was a New York State senator for 10 years, and I got involved in kratom because initially I was very concerned. I heard some reports from the FDA originally back about 6 years ago now, and put in a bill to ban kratom. And to me, it was a blessing, because at that moment, then I started to hear from real people. I started to hear from a lot of people, because they told me, Senator, you can't ban this. It's helped me. And that's why I am now a passionate advocate to make sure that kratom is legal, accessible, and safe. And that's what we talk about, that kratom, unadulterated kratom, is safe and needs to be accessible. But what I want to make sure is clear is that each and every one of you on this call tonight can make a tremendous difference. And the thing that I would ask you to do is that you're all voters, right? And you've probably all voted for a state senator and a state representative. And for me and Mac and many of us on the Kratom team, we're working to pass laws on the state level. And I can't tell you enough how important it is that lawmakers hear your message. And you might not think that they want to hear from you. But the reality is, especially if you are in their district, if you are a voter, a constituent of yours, your input is the most important thing to them. They only survive with your vote. And more importantly, they will take your meeting, they will take your call. And so I would push all of you, the most important thing you can do, besides all the other things we're going to ask you to do, is to pick up the phone and demand that your representative meet with you and listen to you. It doesn't have to be, the meeting doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be next week, but your persistence is key. Lawmakers are drinking from a fire hose. They are either voting on or supporting hundreds, if not thousands of pieces of legislation each session. So it takes a lot to demand their attention. And that's why, of course, we want to use finesse and balance, and we don't want to be annoying, but the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And that's why if you call and you don't get an appointment, call again. If you send an email and they didn't respond, send another one. Because yes, there's hundreds, if not thousands of correspondence going into each state lawmaker's office, but the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You will get that meeting. And I ask you to say, hey, I'd like to come in, or I'd like to do a phone call, and you tell them your story, just like Dion explained to us tonight. I'm sure all of you have a story. Either you were directly impacted or a relative, a family member, somehow you were impacted enough to be involved in this program, in this fight to keep Kratom legal. So your story is just so important. When we're talking to lawmakers, one of the first things that happens is we have to explain what Kratom is. And yes, you know, it's a challenge, but what helps it tremendously is if someone's already talked to them. If someone that they trust, someone that they know in their community has told them about how Kratom has helped them, it makes our job in shepherding legislation through so much easier. Because Mac is absolutely correct. There are forces out there that want to spew misinformation, whether they're doing it intentionally to put out bad information or not. The reality is it's out there. And as soon as the topic comes up of Kratom, people are Googling, you know, they're going to that source and they're not getting the information of real constituents in their districts. So that's why the most important thing is to tell your story. You know, you don't have to be able to do a TED talk in order to tell your story. Just tell them about how it impacted you. And it's their job to listen. Of course, you want to be nice and, you know, you catch more bees with honey. And so you want to present that nice, caring look to your lawmaker. But if they don't schedule that meeting with you, be persistent, because nothing could be more valuable than them hearing from a local resident about how Kratom has helped them. And that's going to help us tremendously. We've made great strides this legislative session, and we're stacking up to do even greater things the rest of this session and into next year. But the most powerful thing, you know, we always hear about the money in politics and government. And I'll tell you, of course, money is there and it's important. But more important than ever is the message. The message it defeats the money time and time again. We see it over and over again, particularly in this political environment. And we have the right message. We have a strong winning message. Now we just have to deliver it. And we know when we have an opportunity to have an honest dialogue with elected officials, we win time and time again, whether it's someone like myself that was critical, wanted to ban Kratom. Now I'm one of the biggest advocates. And we find that sometimes our biggest opponents, if we talk to them and get to explain to them what's really going on, they can sometimes become our biggest champions. And we've seen that time and time again. So the biggest strength we have, the best resource we have to keep Kratom legal and safe is all of you. So I look forward in the coming weeks and months to work with you in this legislative session and in the next to make sure we protect Kratom and keep it safe and legal. So thank you for my few moments tonight, and look forward to talking with many of you in the future and meeting many of you one-on-one in the future as well. So thank you.
David, thank you. And let me just tell you an experience I had last week. I was talking with the legislator and introducing him to Kratom. And as I started my pitch, and I've got it down to the elevator pitch to try to get the introduction done, and he stopped me and he said, "You don't have to bother with that." He said, "I have a constituent who called me and told me how valuable Kratom was. I want to know what I can do to help." Now, that response came from a Kratom constituent, or a constituent of that legislator, who picked up the phone and called that legislator and told him their story. They didn't ask anything. They just said, "I want you to be aware that Kratom has helped me. So when you hear about it, I wanted you to have that understanding and knowledge." That if everybody did nothing but that over the next month and just called their legislator and said, and both the state senator and the state representative, and said, "I just want to take a minute to tell you about Kratom. You may hear about Kratom in your upcoming legislative sessions, but I wanted you to know that you have a constituent that has a positive experience where it's improved the quality of my life or saved my life." Whatever your personal testimonial is, it needs to be shared. So I'd encourage everyone to do that. Now, we'll have more sophisticated kinds of things that we do that are advocacy challenges that we have in various states, and you will get alerts on those. We're going to get better at doing this, by the way, make it more efficient so that we're effective and that doesn't burden you too much. But I can tell you that the bottom line is that when you, as a constituent, and we'll tailor this to make sure that you get to them as a constituent, is the most powerful way. There are going to be occasions where we'll want a larger group of people calling or emailing into a specific targeted legislative campaign that we're doing in a specific state. But most of the time, these legislators don't need 1,000 emails. They need to have 10. They need to have the stories and having had conversations with those 10 people. And that will move them and make the difference. And so it's going to be a more targeted campaign as we go forward that we're going to ask you to do, to meet with your own legislators and make sure that they're there. Now, what does it mean for the people that are in states where the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is passed? And we hope that there'll be more and more of those states as we go forward. It means that we will use you to support other states in a targeted way, but reinforcing with your legislators where there is the Kratom Consumer Protection Act passed, calling them and thanking them that you passed this legislation. I wanted to give you a report on how it's impacted my life. That will have great benefits going forward to us as well. So we'll stop there in terms of the Kratom Consumer Protection Act and the Kratom Protectors and the role that you play. Just stay tuned that Jules is going to contact you. We're strengthening this organization. We're going to build it out stronger and better than ever so that when we get ready for the rollout of the Federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act and additional efforts on the states, that you're going to be prepared. Let me give you a quick report on some of the things that are happening. And for context, everyone needs to understand that every time we do something that is designed to get the Kratom Consumer Protection Act passed in your state, there are an array of our critics that are lining up in order to push back and fight. In the state of Rhode Island, for example, we had this dramatic event where the House of Representatives there, in a state where it is currently banned, voted 47-12 to pass the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. The Department of Health, which was the instigator of the ban in Rhode Island, has vigorously opposed this legislation, and they've gotten the ear of the Senate leadership. And so we're going to have a challenge to educate those Senate leaders, and probably going to have to go into next year in that session in order to get the Rhode Island Kratom Consumer Protection Act passed. That's disappointing, but look at the magnificent accomplishment of getting the House to vote on a 47-12 level, saying that it's time for a change. And we have a commitment from the governor that if the bill is passed, they won't veto it. And that's another issue that we always have to worry about when these critics, and this is in a state where the current acting director of the Department of Public Health in Rhode Island was the person who wrote the original regulation that banned kratom back in 2017 in response to the FDA's encouragement to do so. So in that situation, we just have to fight through that. Now, the good news is that individual is now stepping down, and we'll have a new Department of Health director in Rhode Island, and hopefully that they will follow the science, which is dramatically different than it was in 2017, which supports kratom being available. And I can share with you the most positive kind of evidence of that is when Senator Patty Murray, before the Labor HHS Senate Appropriations Subcommittee, had the NIDA director, the National Institutes on Drug Abuse director, Nora Volkow, asking her about this horrible epidemic of overdose deaths that we're having. What is NIH doing to fight back? And spontaneously, NIDA Director Volkow said, well, many people are looking at kratom as a harm reduction measure. We want to study it more, but it should be available. That's the kind of message from a harm reduction standpoint that we want to be able to convey. And that's fundamentally what the issue is. And so we're working in these states. There are a couple of great things that happen that aren't all that, sometimes don't get as much press. In the state of Louisiana, we had an effort that was instigated by the Department of Health there in Louisiana, another kratom ban. That ban died without even getting a hearing. We fought hard in Louisiana to make sure that the committee members understood that this was the wrong public policy. And of course, the Department of Health down there is in line with with this issue with the Department of Health, with the FDA, and they want to make sure that kratom is banned. We're going to continue to fight that. We had a great victory in Oregon and Colorado. Hard fought, obviously, in Colorado. We still have work to do there. In Missouri, the bill's passed. It's before the governor now. I had conversations with the governor's staff people yesterday and today. We're giving them some additional information that they asked for. The governor there is a former sheriff. And so there's an issue there that we just had to resolve to make sure he understood from a law enforcement perspective what the value that Kratom has. We're alive in Ohio. We expect in the fall to have Senate hearings there. It passed the House there 82-10. We're alive in New Jersey. We expect hearings to be done in Pennsylvania. We had a little blip with the House passage of just where they gutted the consumer protections, but we'll be fighting in the Senate to make sure that those are restored so that we have the framework that we need. And we're also working in Michigan to continue there. So we've got some great inertia that's building here as we continue to add states. And next year, we're going to have great success as we go forward. There's going to be a dozen states that currently are looking at Kratom in their interim sessions in preparation for next year's legislative session. And we are working with those legislators. There's a hearing coming up in July and in Kentucky. We know in Tennessee that there's a lot of work that's being done in preparation for this. And so you will see a lot of activity as we go forward in working with this. And I think that there will be a significant event when the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is filed at the federal level, which will obviously provide the framework that the FDA commissioner has asked Congressman Pocan and the House Appropriations Committee to empower him to have with respect to Kratom. We're going to give him that legislative statutory framework with the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. And we think that'll help push the FDA even further to the position that they need to be in, which is to properly regulate Kratom, eliminate these adulterated Kratom products, and be more active in it. So we're going to be working in a broad effort to make sure that all policymakers at federal and state level understand how important this legislation is. There's always frustration that comes for what's happening in my state. Dion talked about it earlier with California. California is a huge state, very complex, very difficult to get legislation through. We're working hard to find a champion there that will sort of drive it in the legislative session. That will come. We'll find that person eventually that will just be so motivated, they're going to get it done. We've seen that happen in other states. We have states that we know next year are going to be terrific for us. We know Florida is going to be great because we had great success in the committees there. We know that Texas, but for when they were in session last year, they weren't in session this year. They meet every other year. Texas was on the consent calendar in the Senate after having passed overwhelmingly in the House. And but for an unrelated fight between the legislative bodies, the Senate and the House, it got stuck and died. But we will be working to get Texas implemented with the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. And we have our lobbyists on the ground working right now as we speak, making sure that everyone's informed that we can hit the ground running early in the session to make sure that we get it out as fast as possible. We're doing this in numerous other states. We engage with these legislators at various meetings around the country. Senator Bramble, David Carlucci, and Jeff Laredo, myself, we're working all the time on the road, trying to make sure these legislatures are informed about what our agenda is and the science behind Kratom. The scientific team that's engaged in great work, and you're going to see in the next 3 or 4 months dramatic new publications that support Kratom's safety, that talk about context for the case reports that are sometimes reported on that don't accurately portray the role that Kratom has in any health issue that a person might be suffering from, and most importantly, addressing the safety factor with respect to these Kratom deaths. The fact of the matter is that you have a group of medical examiners and coroners in this country who have been improperly influenced by the FDA and by some of the labs that are in this business that have demonized Kratom inappropriately to the point where medical examiners and coroners are incorrectly characterizing deaths that they claim because metrogenine is detected, therefore it plays a contributing role to the death. That's not what the medical examiners and coroners are supposed to be doing. Families have a right to know what the true cause of deaths are. There should be no guesswork here. And the best that a medical examiner can do is say, I'm guessing that because it was detected and because the FDA is saying that it's bad, And because we hear at our medical examiner conferences that leading administrators of these labs are saying that it's bad. But I can tell you, I have spoken directly with the vice president of the NMS Labs, which is one of the bigger laboratories that evaluates these tox screens of decedents. And he acknowledges that they don't have a level of toxicity that would actually be deemed to be fatal with kratom, because it doesn't exist, because they can't prove it with data. They can guess, and guesses aren't the way science is supposed to be done. So we're working hard on a range of issues from a public policy standpoint, from the advocacy standpoint, building this toolkit to give you a lot of information, and we're working with the scientists. In the next couple of weeks, you're going to see a new website that will be up and running called kratomanswers.org. When that becomes live, it's going to be an information site for public policy officials, for legislators, for the news media, and for advocates to go. It's not going to be an advocacy site, but it's going to be an information site that gives the truth about kratom. And so we're going to be fighting hard to push content that you can use in your Facebook posts and all of the information. We're going to go after the misinformation that's out there right now. We're going to attack the DEA's position that kratom is a concern, that we're going to make sure that the FDA becomes more honest in the way that they characterize kratom, so that it aligns with what Secretary Becerra has said publicly, that the data on kratom now is inconclusive, and they're not going to pursue scheduling. And we're going to fight these battles on your behalf with your support and with your assistance as we go forward. So I think that we're in an exciting time. We're doing great work. We're working effectively together. We're going to get better, and Jules is going to help us, and we're going to have a better organization as we go across the board here. We are going to make sure that everyone is accountable that is out there criticizing kratom and doing so without good evidence, without good data, and without good science as we go forward here. So I'm enormously grateful for the people that not only are on this call, that are listening to it or will listen to it when it's distributed, to let them understand how grateful we are for being able to join in this fight, to have your voices raised, that we do it in a positive way, and that we are telling our story so that the outcomes can be that other people that right now are in the dark, are able to come into the light and understand that kratom can be a harm reduction measure, and that kratom is a safe product when it's responsibly used and properly formulated for people. So that's our message. That's what we're going to fight for. Ryan has been a great addition to our team. We're building a stronger team at the AKA with your help, and we're appreciative of the financial support you provide to us in order to do that. We're going to keep this battle going, and we're going to do it as warriors, shoulder to shoulder, to make sure that we carry it across the finish line. So with that, Ryan, I'll turn it back to you. We're obviously glad to open it for any questions anyone might have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mac. Thank you, David. Thank you, Dion. We do have a couple questions regarding current FDA legislation. I'm assuming that's talking about the PDUFA, if you have a few minutes to talk about that.
Yeah, this is the PDUFA Act is the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, that every 5 years it has to be reauthorized by the Congress. It is $1 billion plus amount of money that, under the authority of the PDUFA Act, that the FDA is able to collect from various manufacturers of drugs and medical devices and biosimilars and that kind of thing. It's critical that it gets passed. It's must-pass legislation. And because every 5 years this pops up, every legislator that wants to find a vehicle to give a free ride to their legislation, they try to add this legislation onto PDUFA. Traditionally, there's been resistance to adding all of these other bills that haven't gone through what's called regular order, meaning they haven't had a committee hearing, there hasn't been public testimony offered, there hasn't been questions and debate done at the committee level by the members of the Senate or House committees where these hearings would take place. They take a ride and they put ornaments on, they call it the ornamentation of the Christmas tree. In this case, it's PDUFA bill. That happened with the dietary supplement bill, which has mandatory product listing. And Senator Durbin, who has been a longstanding critic of the dietary supplement industry, added his mandatory product listing language to the PDUFA bill. Not a single hearing, no public testimony. They haven't even vetted the language. And even in the HHS, the Health Committee markup, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee markup of the bill, the amendments were turned down on party line votes because Senator Durbin is cracking the whip as a member of the leadership. The House did not knuckle under to Senator Durbin's language, and they did not include it in their past version. So we have a battle that's set up now between the House and the Senate. There are members of the Senate who are being very supportive of us, helping us. Senator Scott, Senator Romney, there are a number of them. Senator Lee is helping us, although he's not on the committee. He's a vocal voice for us. We have advocates on the Senate side. Senator Burr is another one. We're going to continue to fight this. On the House side, the Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman, Frank Pallone, is not a fan of this legislation becoming the vehicle for all the orphan kinds of legislative initiatives that people are trying to take the ride on, and he's resisting it. And we are going to be fighting this battle hard. You are going to get some advocacy messaging that we hope you'll join us on. We've done it in the Senate, and we managed to get a lot of consternation and what they call chaos that even delayed the vote for a while. We want to do the same thing on the Senate side to deliver this powerful message. We've got a couple of weeks of a window to do that. So stay tuned for advisories that you get from AKA to do it. There are there are hundreds of thousands of other advocates in the health and wellness community and in the dietary supplement community who have joined us, and we've joined them in this messaging. Now, Kratom is the criticism that I've heard from some people. Kratom's not mentioned in the mandatory product listing. No product is. What it does is it gives the FDA enormous new powers so that they go to any manufacturer of a dietary or herbal supplement, which are Kratom manufacturers, and they can say, we want to see your label. They say that because, we were all about transparency. No, they're about bureaucratic control. And they can look at that label and they can say, we don't like what's in your label. It's inconsistent with, and then fill in the blank. And they'll trump up a lot of other charges about what it's inconsistent with. And clearly, because Kratom's already on the FDA's target list, this gives them de facto control to actually ban Kratom if they choose to do so. And of course, that's an important discretionary part of this. What we want is for this legislation to require that prior to any enforcement action taken by the FDA, that they have to issue a final agency action decision, which means that they can't just jawbone us and say, well, you can't sell it until you get approval from us, and we'll continue to deliberate on it. They have to take final agency action, because only then can they be taken to court. And absent that ability to get final agency action, the FDA will be able to literally put out of business dietary supplement manufacturers on a pretext of saying, we want their label to be obviously transparent. That's not what the FDA wants. We know the FDA has had a decades-long bias against dietary and herbal supplements. We know that they have a specific bias against the Kratom industry and Kratom consumers, and you can see that with their actions that date back to 2012, when they imposed the first import alerts on the bogus documentation of deaths that they claimed occurred in Sweden, that the result of Kratom, when in fact it was an adulterated Kratom product with O-desmethyl-tramadol at a dose level that had been put in the cup of coffee in the morning, would have killed you. But they don't look at it that way. They don't tell the truth about Kratom. And that's why we have to fight this battle. But this mandatory product listing is dangerous stuff. The other fight that we have is to make sure that Commissioner Califf holds true to his commitment that he made to Congressman Pocan, that they are going to devise a set of regulations that would allow for the proper manufacturing and sale of Kratom products in the United States. And if they do that, then it sort of narrows the authorities that are granted, even if the mandatory product listing legislation is passed in its current form. But we need to amend it to defang it and require accountability from the FDA, and to restrict them from having an unfettered ability to step in and not only ban the labeling of a dietary herbal supplement, but also to ban them from being able to have unfettered ability to walk into establishments to get the listing of all of the distribution outlets in the country of Kratom, so that they would be empowered to go in and shut all those stores down. So that's our fight. It's a serious one. It's a backdoor ban that the FDA would have the authority to use if the language as currently written is enacted. We think there'll be amendments to it. We think it may actually be jettisoned and be forced back into regular order. And of course, we would welcome that, to have this opportunity for that kind of discussion. But we thank everyone who's already responded to the request that you email your senators on the Help Committee. Now we're going to be doing it on the House side here in the next 10 days or so. So stay tuned for that information.
And Mac, any thoughts on a timeline before this goes before a final vote?
Well, this is the drop dead point for PDUFA to be passed is September 30th. It has to be enacted by then. The legislature, the Congress has a week before they go on to their July 4th recess. We think that they'll probably pass the Senate version over to the House. The House will then take it up in July after the July 4th recess. And that's when I fight and why we have to be very vocal and visible after the July 4th recess. So that's why the timing is important.
Right. Okay, and then from a little earlier in the chat from Kendall, will the AKA fight to prevent a prescription kratom-derived drug from causing a ban on the plant it was derived from? That's what worries me most.
So this is a little bit a complex issue. There is a drug exclusion rule that says that if someone files an IND for a new drug application, that would then classify the underlying product as being a drug and therefore not marketable. In order for and all of the information I've seen so far, for someone to file an NDA, a new drug application for a kratom product, that the current plans are for it to be a chemically formulated product, not the actual leaf or natural alkaloids of the kratom plant. And that would create a fight over the drug exclusion rule. We don't think it will apply. And unless they actually apply for a patent on the alkaloids of the natural plant and use those natural plant alkaloids as the predicate for their new drug application, which the current company that's engaged in this research is not planning on doing, then I think we're relatively safe. But the FDA will do whatever it can to try to make that the drug exclusion rule apply to us. And we're going to stand ready to fight. We'll end up in court on that battle, I think, in the end. But it's a protracted, long battle. In order for a new drug application to be submitted, reviewed, and ultimately approved is as probably around 7 to 10 years. So we've got some time to fight this battle, but we could get the early battle about whether the drug exclusion rule applies when this company applies for its IND and for the testing protocols that's necessary. And then they'll have to characterize exactly how their product is being formulated, whether it's the natural plant alkaloids or the chemically synthesized and created alkaloids. And my understanding is it's the latter of those rather than the former. So I think we're positioned that our scientific arguments are going to be in place to protect kratom in its natural form.
That's great, Mac. Thank you. And let's see, we have one more question from Anthony, and I'm sorry if I've missed anyone's questions, so please just resend them and I'll get to them. But when the KCPA gets passed federally, will that be the ultimate victory for all of us?
There's never going to be an ultimate victory. I think well, I should amend that. I think if the FDA finally comes to its senses, and I think there's a couple of ways this can happen. First, I think it could be a attrition where the anti-kratom policy people at the FDA either leave the FDA to go on to a company to work for, or they go to the great beyond. Then it will probably tamp down some of the fervor of the FDA. That's a long-term solution. The shorter term solution is the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, which will impose specific standards on the FDA in order for there to regulate. It's very much like what happened in 1994 when the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act was passed unanimously by the Congress over the strong objections of the FDA. The FDA at that time wanted to force all dietary supplements and vitamins through the new drug application process. That would have banned what today is a $53 billion industry in America, where more than 70% of Americans use dietary supplements and vitamins in order to maintain their health and well-being. But if the FDA had their way, they would have put all that out of business. So I think that our objective here is to do everything we can to push back on the FDA to keep them in that box, which says that they don't have the authority to come in and ban kratom or to eliminate it from the marketplace by using regulatory powers that were never intended to give them the kind of authority that they've seized in this case. So that's why these battles over mandatory product listing. It's why the battle for the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is critical. We want that to be the 2022 version of the DSHEA Act. We want Congress to restrict the FDA's authority to act unilaterally to take away from consumers a product that's, when it's responsibly used, can have the health benefits and harm reduction tools that are necessary to maintain your health and well-being.
That's great. Thank you, Mac. And I'm not seeing any other questions. We'll leave it open for another minute. David,
Let me respond to one that I see.
comment.
What happened to the AK Forum? The American Kratom Association is a structured organization. And one of the things that we used was the AK Forum, which was intended to allow for a discussion among kratom advocates and consumers to actually get information about how they can most responsibly use it. In our evaluation of how we can apply existing resources to deliver that kind of opportunity, we found a couple of things were true. One is that Reddit far surpassed our ability to maintain any kind of good communication back and forth with people. It surpassed us by dramatic leaps and bounds of engagement and the number of people that are involved in it. And so we became this very small, almost an insular network of a few people as opposed to what was really happening. The second thing that we realized is that we need to be proactive in two specific areas. One is we need to have information available to consumers, accurate, fact-based, and science-based information. And that's what kratomanswers.org will be. And that's ready to be rolled out here in a couple of weeks. We also recognized that we needed to have a repository of scientific information that consumers could go to evaluate, read, study, research, and determine for themselves from the science what the best application of that science would be in their personal use of kratom. And so we found that to be deemed it to be a more effective way of doing it. Not that the forum wasn't something that was interesting and potentially valuable to people, but it was the application of resources for a smaller number of people for information that they could readily get and engage with on Reddit. And this other level of information where we can disseminate it is going to be accomplished through our kratomanswers.org and the Kratom Science website that'll be up shortly as well, where it's a repository for all of this information. And I want to emphasize, and this is an important part, we are a community. We're a family. Sometimes we fight with each other. That happens within families. And I think that this was a disappointment. This decision was a disappointment for some people. I understand that. I know that there's some that are upset with us about it, but it's just truly an effort to try to maximize the limited resources we have to get the biggest bang for the buck that we're applying, and it's your money, applying to solutions for dissemination of information and good advocacy campaigns. So that was the reason this happened. It's a little bit of a speed bump in our effort. I know that made some people unhappy, but we're going to fight hard to get through that, and we're going to be better for it in the long run. I can assure everyone that our efforts are in the right place here, and we're going to continue to expand our information base so that we can serve the same group of people in a much larger scale with this good information.
And Mac, one question, do we know if Republicans or Democrats are more open to Kratom, if either?
So this is, I love this. This is a great question.
I thought you would.
And I'd love to tell this story. When you look back in 2016, and that was the real start of our advocacy campaign, when you have Orrin Hatch, who then was one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, signing on to a letter supporting Kratom's continued consumer access and legal access for Kratom, and you have Bernie Sanders signing on to the very same letter, that tells you the breadth of the philosophical divide for which Kratom rests squarely in a bipartisan way. And there are others. I mean, you had Senator Gillibrand, Senator Wyden, Senator Booker, all who were strong advocates for Kratom. And then you have equally strong advocates like Senator Lee. You have members over on the House side of Republicans who are strongly advocating for this. This is not a partisan issue, and it's not one that divides us based on partisan politics. It divides us between the bureaucracy of the FDA and their greedy appetite for more power against the right of individual citizens to use a natural product responsibly in order to maintain their health and well-being. And that's something the FDA doesn't like. They want to regulate all of these products, and including Kratom, but also other products. There are some products on the marketplace that the FDA appropriately should market. But let me tell you the best example of the evidence of where the FDA is disingenuous. They tell people on their website, no one should be using Kratom, right? We have delivered through our truth in labeling program at the AK more than 60 documented complaints of Kratom vendors over the last almost 2 years, where we have shown them that you have these Kratom vendors that are making illegal therapeutic claims about their Kratom products. Now, the claim itself is illegal, and they're trying to induce sales. If the product actually does what some of these people are claiming, then it's an adulterated product, because Kratom doesn't deliver what some of these companies are claiming. In that 2-year period, where we have 60 plus complaints delivered to the FDA, and we've documented every one of them, there's not been a single warning letter. You can go on to the FDA website and you can look for warning letters. You will see warning letters that are issued within 30 days after a complaint on a variety of consumer products. And yet here's where the FDA says no one should be consuming a Kratom product, and we deliver to them the documentation on 60 plus Kratom vendors that are violating the law, and they won't even issue a warning letter. There's something wrong with that story. And what's wrong with it is the FDA wants to continue to claim that there are vendors out there that are making illegal therapeutic claims to justify their import alert, one of their import alerts, on Kratom raw materials. And if they put those bad actors out of business, they have to let that import alert go. They don't want to do that. This is the most cynical, bureaucratic power play by the FDA. So we have a little surprise in the works for them that's going to force them to have to account for these things. So stay tuned. You're going to see some exciting stuff on that front over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to show them that we're serious about making the FDA accountable when there's a complaint filed, and their duty to make sure that these companies are either issue warning letters, and then subsequently, if necessary, to prosecute them for these illegal therapeutic claims. But that's just one example of where the FDA is manipulating the bureaucratic process in order to get to their goal, which is to ban Kratom, and ultimately that's their endpoint that they want to get to.
Thank you, Mac. And if there's any more questions, my apologies again if I missed anyone's question. I believe we caught everything, but please email me directly or call me. We'll get to you however I need to. Not seeing anything else come through. Any closing comments, David or Mac?
Well, I just want to thank everyone and echo what Mac just talked about, and the question about the partisanship. We see it on every issue, right, in American politics today. And luckily, Kratom is one that's not partisan, and we have to fight to keep it that way. And we have different states doing the Kratom consumer protection for different reasons. And it's one where when we can have that honest dialogue with the politician, that we can win. And we jeopardize that when it gets into this partisan territory. But we've been blessed that this isn't a partisan issue, and we're going to work to make sure that it doesn't become one. And we're there to talk to Democrats, talk to Republicans, talk to everyone in between. It's a message that wins. And together, when we tell your stories, we're gonna advance this legislation. So thank you for your commitment, everyone, and look forward to working with all of you. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add one last thing. Just my commitment and AKA's commitment and the commitment of our team to do everything we can across the board on advocacy, on promoting good science, on promoting good public policy to protect your right to be able to consume safe Kratom products. We can do a lot in that effort, but we can't do it without you. And so we hope that you'll just be re-energized, keep fighting with us. Sometimes it's discouraging, but that's life. And we just have to get back up and keep fighting because our cause is just. And with your help, we're going to be successful in the long run in making sure that the FDA loses in their battle and that the consumers win in making sure that they have access to safe Kratom products that can really literally improve or save their lives.
That's so great. Dion, anything? I really appreciate your time tonight. Just thank you. And
So Dion, you're muted. So if
there
you
you
say,
are.
there you go.
Yeah. No, the only thing that adds a lot of frustration is with all of the budgets and everything that, the government has to do and the costs that are rising. It seems ironic that the FDA has all this excess money to go after Kratom when there's other things that they could be going after.
Amen.
Yeah.
And that's part of the frustration. They're taking our money and fighting with us with our money. And
Yes.
we just gotta, that's the way government operates. We just gotta keep fighting. No question.
Yeah. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Kratom Protectors. And we will be in touch with our next call. Have a great evening.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.